Hello and welcome to the third of 8 webinars in a series covering each of the levers in Equiteq's Equity Growth Wheel. Today we'll be talking about client relationships. I'm Pat Webb, a Client Growth Director based in Vancouver, and I'll be your host. And I'll be speaking with Paul Beaumont, another of our Client Growth Directors, and Paul's based in London. I'll be asking him to give you some insights about what you need to know to nurture your clients in order to grow mutually beneficial long-term relationships, because that's the best way of guaranteeing future growth. That'll take about 20 minutes. Then in the last 10, I'll be putting your questions to him. So please, can you post your questions on the control panel on the right-hand side of the screen as we go? The question box appears towards the bottom. So, Paul, what's the most important message about the client relationship lever?
Yeah, hi Pat. You may remember that in the first webinar in this series, we talked about the importance of making your market proposition crystal clear. And last week, our colleague Shant spoke about increasing sales and profits. Well, your existing clients should know your proposition better than anyone else, and the easiest place to grow sales and profits is with people who already understand the benefits that you can deliver. And this is achieved through outstanding client relationship management. So the key message, Pat, is to simply sell more of what you do to people you already know by expertly managing those relationships.
Okay, well, let's quickly remind ourselves of where the client relationships fit within the overall context of growing and developing your firm, both for growing it now and for making it more attractive for a company wishing to buy the firm in the future. Those of you who've joined our previous webinars will be familiar with this picture now. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this picture represents a high-level view of all the operational issues that an acquirer of a consultancy will look at to identify just how risky it would be for them to buy the firm. There's a benchmarking tool that sits beneath this structure, which we've used to evaluate nearly 400 firms in our M&A advisory work. So let's zoom in now, Paul. Can you give us a specific look at the client relationship lever?
Certainly. I've already said that the key message here is that you should look to sell more of what you do to people you already know. Selling to people who already know you, what we call farming, is much easier and more cost-effective than selling to people who don't know you, which is hunting. We'll come back to hunting in the 6th webinar in the sales and marketing process. You need both, of course, but today we're going to concentrate on how to become better farmers. The benefit of taking this approach is that effective account management reduces customer churn and increases the lifetime value of a client. Let's have a look at this 2x2 matrix. You'll see along the bottom axis we've got clients, both new clients and current clients, and on the side axis we've got services, and again new services and current services. And what we're saying here is that the proportion of effort and also roughly the proportion of revenue should probably be something which the numbers indicate there. Now please don't give the figures more precision than they deserve. They're just indicative. Let's start at the top right-hand quadrant. So current clients, current services. This is where you need to be farming. That's why I coloured it in green. The resources you need to invest here are those of your account managers and above those the senior leadership team. Similarly, in the quadrant below that, in the bottom right-hand corner, the same group of people, your account managers and senior members of the management team, will be responsible for selling new services to existing clients. Now, much of your marketing budget will be deployed in the top left-hand quadrant, trying to capture new clients and deliver to them your proven current services. Remember, this is the box where you'll be hunting. But we would encourage you to limit your activity in the bottom left-hand quadrant, which is to people you don't know. Of course, that's exactly what you may be doing if you're a startup or if you're testing new intellectual property. But it's not impossible to operate in this quadrant, but it is quite difficult. And the point is, you don't want to end up here by accident.
Okay, so we've understood this is all about farming. So exactly how do we get started?
So the basis for developing good client relationships is a simple account management process. And in the next few slides, we'll be looking at these elements in more detail. But here, I just want to give you a quick overview. You'll see the process map there. Box 1 says that you have to classify your clients. Obviously, some of your clients will be more important to you now and in the future, and it's crucial to identify these. The second box tells you to create to create account plans for those important accounts in sufficient to manage them successfully. You simply won't be able to do this for all of your clients, which is why you start by segmenting or classifying them. The third box says that once you've created the account plans, you need to manage them in a simple and effective way that gives you control of what you're doing without sinking you in bureaucracy. And you'll notice that the process feeds into two more boxes at the end: update sales pipeline and contribute to budget process. What we mean by that is that all the information coming out of the account plan in terms of future opportunities should be captured in your sales pipeline so that you can make resourcing decisions that are as accurate as possible. And of course, when you create the revenue budget, you should inform it with a grassroots understanding of what you're likely to sell in the account next year.
Paul, you've made a really critical point here, so I think it's worth an extra minute just to underline it. Revenue and profit goals get cascaded down, but when the account plans get rolled up, sometimes the numbers don't align, there's a gap. So how do you ensure that the account managers get targets that they really believe they can achieve and that they can then stick to the plans they create in order to meet those targets?
Yes, that's a good question. Well, let's start with the most basic thing. The account managers need to know what the revenue targets actually are for the organisation and how their account will contribute to that. Now, if they know as a result of their excellent account management what they're likely to sell next year, they can compare the target with their own expectation of what's achievable. And the reconciliation of those two numbers becomes an iterative process until both the account manager and the leadership team are happy to have realistic, achievable growth targets. Now, maintaining the sales pipeline ensures that there's a clear line of sight between the targets and what is actually being achieved as the year progresses. So if the performance drops below the target, then the account manager needs to know that and needs to start to change how she spends her time. It may be that she needs more support from the head of sales or from other members of the leadership team. Their job, after all, is to make sure that she succeeds.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for that. If that's the overview, can you take us through each of the steps?
So remember that the first step is to classify the accounts, and in this example on the screen I've shown 4 different account types. You don't have to use these exact terms, and you might have slightly more or fewer classifications, but it really helps to put them into different groups because each one requires a different management approach. So let me take you through my example. The top group is the key accounts. These will be high value, possibly annuity accounts that provide a significant contribution to the revenue stream, both now and in the foreseeable future. As a rule of thumb, we say they should each contribute more than, say, 10% of the total revenue. Now, you need to focus on these accounts. So the accountability for sales and delivery lies with an account manager, supported by the head of sales and an account team. And that account team should meet every 2 or 3 months to review the plans and the performance. The next category down is what we call the emerging accounts, and these are medium value accounts with the potential to develop into a strong revenue stream. So somewhere between 1 and 10% of total revenue each. And these accounts are managed by a slightly smaller account team, again led by an account manager, And the head of sales this time should be called in if a large opportunity is being pursued there. And the account team probably should meet every 4 to 6 months to review performance. Transaction accounts are lower still, so relatively low value accounts which provide sporadic opportunities but little future growth potential. They may also represent 1 to 10% of revenue. And those accounts should be managed by one person who will be responsible for reviewing the performance of the account as required. And finally, the exit accounts. These will be low value accounts, possibly even loss-making with no growth potential at all. What you might try to do here is perhaps increase the prices to get more profitable levels when opportunities arise, or simply decline opportunities that come out of these exit accounts.
Well, I can see the value of this classification, but it sounds like it might be a very complicated thing to do. Can you take us through how we do that?
Yes, well, as with all analysis, Pat, it needs to be at an appropriate level that guides you to an answer that's good enough, without searching for a degree of precision that's simply not justified. This isn't something that should take you days and days to do. So let's have a look at this 2x2 matrix on the left. Obviously, being consultants, we see most of the universe through a series of 2x2 matrices. But this one is actually different to the one I showed you earlier, which is why it's in a different color. This time, the two axes are current profitability on the left-hand side and growth potential on the bottom. And the idea here is that you can populate this matrix as a leadership team exercise. Taking some post-it notes, write down the name of the clients on each note and the profitability you've earned from them in, say, the last 12 months in pounds or dollars. Between you, you should be able to agree the growth potential of each client by considering things like the opportunity to repeat your services there and the degree of saturation of your services within the client. And then simply map the post-it notes onto the matrix. Those of you that are following the color scheme will notice that it's the same as the previous slide. So top right-hand quadrant is where the key accounts will be clustered, and this is where you need to become expert farmers. Some management time will also be required in the lighter green boxes, but please don't spend any of your precious management time on the clients in the blue bottom left-hand box. Now, I started my answer to you, Pat, by implying that you should avoid paralysis by analysis, but another simple supporting diagnostic you can carry out is to a client as shown by the Pareto chart on the right-hand side. The classification of the 4 account types, key, emerging, transaction and exit, will roughly map onto the Pareto as shown. And this can support your conclusions and is also a very easy way to communicate and inform the investment of the organisation's time.
This is a really key message, isn't it, Paul? Identify and then spend your time in the key accounts. So what's the process for managing them?
Yeah, you're right. I'm glad you asked me that question, Pat. And from now on, we're only going to be talking about those key accounts. I know this looks like a fairly boring 8-box model, but the key point here is to get momentum into the account planning process and to maintain focus. You can start it with a really engaging, dynamic workshop with people in your business who work with that particular account. So preparation is the key to a successful meeting. And what we suggest is you kick off your account meeting with the account manager presenting information in the first 2 boxes, summarizing the client business. It's amazing how often people who work with a client don't know very much about what else they might do or how big they are or where their divisions are or where their geography is. And secondly, summarize your relationship with the client. So what projects you've done there, how much money you've earned, margins and so on and so forth. And then the whole of the account team needs to spend time working together on boxes 3, 4, 5 and 6. In number 6, where we talk about identifying opportunities for additional work, we're going to come back to that in the next webinar on quality of fees. This is where you carry out things like white space analysis, looking at what you've delivered to a client and what you could still deliver in terms of other services. the client needs, you've created a stakeholder plan, you've done a SWOT analysis, and you've identified opportunities for additional work within the client. And now box 7, this is where the account manager needs to be cognizant of the business targets, because this is where you have to write down in a sentence or two what you want to achieve with this account. So when doing this, you need to be aware of how your revenue and profitability from that account fits into the overall business plan. But more than that, you want to articulate what will be the result for the client of working with you. So here's an example for a supply chain consultancy. We will be the lead advisor to the client on supply chain design, resulting in reducing their inventory by 20% and improving their service levels to 99%, with an anticipated revenue for us of $1 million per annum.
Paul, in a consultancy, would you ever envisage that you'd invite a client to come to an account planning meeting, or if you're doing it on their site, have them work with you?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, especially as you're likely to have a very strong relationship with them, you'll obviously have to be careful not to share commercially sensitive information with them, such as how much money you've made from them. But many clients would be delighted to work with you to identify how you can help them, how much more benefit you can deliver, and how you're going to ring-fence resources for them. And they can even help you articulate your account objective.
Yeah, I think it would be brilliant if you could do your account planning with the client. But whether you can or not, how do you make sure that the plans don't end up gathering dust on the shelf?
Well, I think, Pat, the answer is to keep the plans really simple. If you look at this slide, you'll see that we have a sales opportunity plan and a stakeholder plan. Now, in each case, what you need to do is focus on completing the next actions for the priorities. Don't try to boil the ocean. Make sure that everyone on the team knows which 3 items they're going to complete this month. It all comes down to making sure you know who's going to set the sales meetings and then just getting on and actually setting them.
Yeah. You've been talking, Paul, a lot about within the consultancy, managing the accounts. Would a potential buyer of a firm want to see these account plans?
Oh, for sure, because that's what will give them confidence in your future forecast. They'll want to see the plans. They want to understand the level at which you're working in your clients, type of client you have, the longevity of the relationship, and how you manage all of your data, for example, in a good CRM system.
Well, I can see how crucial client relationship management is to both growing the business and ultimately to selling it. Now, let me ask you some of the questions that have come up from some of our listeners, Paul. The first question was posted by somebody on the registration page ahead of the start of the webinar. So thank you for doing that. That's a great way to make sure your question gets asked. And the question is, how do you build long-lasting, valuable client relationships when you only have a small team?
Yes, well, of course, everybody starts with a small team. And if you have a small team, it's even more important to be selective about where you invest your time. I mean, right from the start, you can't afford to be doing all of the delivery yourself. You have to be disciplined enough to reserve sufficient time for you to be managing the clients rather than just delivering the engagements. Otherwise, you'll just never grow. So let me make a few suggestions as to how you might make the time. Firstly, just simply book time in your diary, say an hour a week, to speak with your client sponsor and the other important stakeholders. Secondly, make sure you have valuable insights to share when you have the meetings, and that can include updates on the projects as well as insights into the wider hot topics. And thirdly, I think invite the key stakeholders to your project review meetings so that you can personally show them what's going on. And lastly, ask them for referrals.
Right, and that ask them for referrals, we're going to pick that up in the webinar about the sales and marketing lever. So there's more on that in a couple of weeks. Another question that's come in here, Paul, is when should a firm invest in a CRM system?
Yeah, we get asked that quite a lot. So I think there's several points to be made there. I mean, firstly, a CRM system is, of course, an automation tool. So if the underlying processes is poor, just automating it won't really deliver much benefit. Similarly, if the CRM system has much more functionality than you actually need, you may find it becomes far too burdensome. And at the very early stages of a company's life, it's perfectly acceptable to manage your client data on a spreadsheet. But that will stop working for you when you grow and have more clients, more offerings, more relationships, and more opportunities. And that's when you'll need CRM. It would certainly be unusual to be able to manage a business of more than £2 million or $3 million without a CRM system. And given that these days you can buy the service by seats, you can make it very affordable.
Yeah. There's another question, Paul, about how do you manage relationships for a business in which you tend to deliver services intensely for a period of time, and then you may not be needed for another 3 years or so?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like maybe a strategy house or something like that. I think that you simply have to find reasons for going back within that period. I mean, 3 years is a long time. It's very easy for people to have moved in that period, and for them to simply forget you. So you need to find reasons for them not to forget you. At the simplest level, you should put a note in your diary to phone your sponsor every 6 months or so, and again go back to them with thoughts on hot topics, things that you've noticed happening in the market that they might be interested in. I mean, as people will know, one of the what we do with our clients when they're ready is that we take them to market and help them sell and do a transaction. And one of the things we do is when an interesting sale takes place within their sector, we write to them and tell them about it, even if we haven't actually had a formal engagement with them for a year or so. That's a good example of how to keep in touch. The other thing you might want to consider is set up some kind of networking organization for your clients. So give them a reason to meet with you and maybe others of your clients, provided they're not competitors, of course, maybe once a year or something like that.
This question is at the other end of the spectrum. You said one of your in one of your classifications, Paul, it was exit. Would you ever really decide to walk away from a client?
Yes, it can be painful, can't it? Yes. So let me give you some examples. If the potential client or the existing client is in a geography which is in a completely different country, perhaps with a different language and culture and so on, a client that's very expensive to service, I think that will be a good client that you might want to walk away from. It may be out of sector. One of the things we talk about quite a lot is the importance of focus within the organization. So if it's in a sector that is not core to what you do and there's no real potential for you to grow further services there, then that's another reason to walk away. And simply if there's no potential for future growth with that client. I mean, I would add that it has been said that the best way to run a consultancy is where demand for your service is slightly higher than your actual capacity. And if you're in that situation, then of course it becomes a lot easier to walk away from the clients that are causing you to lose money rather than to make money.
Our time's almost coming to a close, Paul. Do you have any recommendations on what to do tomorrow? How to improve client relationships starting right away?
Yeah, well, I think the simple answer is that let's look at these three things. This is, if you like, homework that you can start right now. Start, stop, and continue. The thing to start is to classify your accounts into, say, the 4 types that we talked about earlier, and appoint managers for the key accounts. Second thing, stop spending all your time in the key accounts on delivery only. As a senior manager, you need to make time for account management. And secondly, stop spending any senior management time on the exit accounts. And in terms of continue, Well, continue updating your sales pipeline with forecasts from your client accounts.
Great. Well, Paul, that's all we've time for. If you've posted a question which we didn't have time to answer, then we'll get back to you individually after the event. If you'd like to discuss the contents of the webinar or any aspect of your growth and sale plans with us, please don't hesitate to contact us. If you aren't already a member, then please do join our Equiteq Edge Club. It's a free source of information for consulting firm owners looking to grow and sell their businesses. And you'll find expert guidance, unique research, guest articles, and lots more, including a monthly newsletter which highlights that month's features. Thank you to everyone for listening. Next week, we'll be talking about our fourth lever, which is quality of fee income. So please do check out our website for all our webinars and to register. So thank you again, and goodbye for now.
Thanks. Bye.